Everybody got the packets? Okay, well, let me first thank everybody for being here today. I, of course, called the press conference to review the actions that I am taking as county controller in regards to the misuse of county funds that was discovered in the course of our audit of county vehicles. You have, as I mentioned, lots of information in the packets before you, but before I reference what you have in each of those packets, what I would like to do is provide an overview of the information that I will be presenting to you, and then I will get into a little bit more detail, and during that portion of the press conference, I will refer to the specific documents so you'll have an idea of what is in those 150 plus pages. And then following that, I will open it up to questions. So as I noted, this press conference has been called to address the misuse of county funds, specifically funds that were discovered in the course of our ongoing audit of county vehicles. On August 28th, my office initiated an audit of county-owned vehicles, including take-home vehicles. There are 151 take-home vehicles in Allegheny County, and the county pays the total cost related to the vehicle. So that includes commuting expenses, gas, wear and tear, and so forth. The county pays all costs related to all the vehicles, including those that are used for take-home use. Since beginning this audit, my office has obtained and reviewed records from various sources, including fuel cards. We have also performed odometer readings, and through all of that information, we have analyzed and compared the use of the county-owned vehicles. The personal use of these vehicles is strictly prohibited by the County Administrative Code, as well as the county vehicle policy, and in reference to IRS reporting rules that are used by Allegheny County. Under county law, no employee is permitted to use county resources, including specifically motor vehicles, for any purpose other than county business. The data that we have reviewed in the course of this audit has revealed that County Executive Richard Fitzgerald has misused a county vehicle for personal and political purposes. That has cost the taxpayers thousands of dollars. The activity began in the second quarter of 2012, but became consistent and more frequent in each of the following quarters up until the present time. By cross-reference to social media, including Fitzgerald's own campaign Twitter account, my office has identified at least 100 instances in which Fitzgerald submitted documents to the county claiming to be on official county business, but in fact was charging the taxpayers for his personal and political use. Additionally troubling to me is that Fitzgerald has omitted nearly 20,000 miles used on the vehicle. That has been verified by cross-reference to fuel card usage, the documents he submitted, which were inaccurate, and a current odometer reading of his vehicle, which was just obtained this week by my office. As I noted, this misuse has cost taxpayers of Allegheny County thousands of dollars. It may be as much as $13,125 or more. We are now working to determine the specific figure so that my office may recover all misused taxpayer funds. In order to determine that, we sent a letter to Fitzgerald today. That letter requested that he submit detailed and accurate information regarding his use of the vehicle so that my office may calculate the total amount that he must repay to Allegheny County. At this point, I am going to segue into explaining what you have in the packets before you. We do, however, have slides, so don't feel that you have to page through those. You will be able to see up here, and I will be explaining it fully. So the first document that you have is the press release, which basically outlines what I just shared with you. Following that, you have a copy of the letter that was sent to Fitzgerald this morning in order for us to formally notify him that my office will be seeking repayment of these funds pursuant to my duty, which is defined by Pennsylvania law. If you skip the following, behind that in your packets, you have these slides, which I'll get to in a moment, but let me just explain the final portion of your packet. So also pursuant to my duty, and this is the large part of the packet, my duty as controller, I am required immediately to report any misuse of county funds to law enforcement agencies. So on October 24th, I sent a letter detailing this misuse to 4 law enforcement entities, specifically Stephen Zappala, District Attorney, Kathleen Kane, Attorney General, David Hickton, U.S. Attorney, and Robert Caruso, Director of the Pennsylvania State Ethics Commission. Within that packet, you will see an appendix, if you want to pick this up. The appendix is the blue part in the packets, and that details where many of these discrepancies lie. And let me emphasize that it is my duty by state law to both immediately report misuse to the proper authorities and also to seek repayment. So these 2 actions, the letter to Fitzgerald today and also the letter that went approximately 10 days ago to the law enforcement entities, are required by me, or required by state law for me to do that as county controller. This is hard to read. Up here it's smaller, but when I reference that there are 100 instances that we have identified in which Fitzgerald claimed that he was on a county official purpose, charged taxpayers, but instead was attending a political event. You see this here in this appendix, and it goes by date. And so on the following slides, I'm just going to pull some examples so you see clearly the misuse and how it was documented. Notably, the column here that reads attested business purpose listed, that is the language submitted by Fitzgerald. That is his own form submitted to the county. So these examples show in his own words where he was in fact charging the county for his use of the vehicle for political purposes. So now if I refer you to the slides that you have in your packet, you see on Fitzgerald's own submitted reports how he detailed an activity that was not in fact county business purpose. Here you see an example where he charged county taxpayers for travel to and from the airport in order to attend the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. And as I said, we have cross-referenced this to documents publicly available, including Mr. Fitzgerald's own Twitter account. Here it reads, "Great experience in Charlotte National Convention. I am proud to represent Pennsylvania and looking forward to hearing Barack Obama." Other examples where he has charged the county taxpayers for use that is not business of Allegheny County is campaigning in surrounding counties for various candidates. Here you see that he listed Speaking Jefferson, Pennsylvania, where he was, by his own Twitter account, campaigning in Greene County for a state representative candidate. You also see many examples here. This is now moving into, I believe this is now 2013. The 2 prior examples were 2012. Now in 2013, you see examples regionally throughout Allegheny County, here in the city, This is a bar tour where he's campaigning, yet charging the county taxpayers for that travel in the county-issued vehicle.
What's a bar tour?
That was the reference to the social media. These social media examples were at Vote Fitz, at his campaign Twitter account. Bar tour in the Hill District for the mayoral election. The pictures on the Twitter account. This next one is an example of a media event where on his own form he lists Media Greenfield. Some of you may in fact have been at this event where it was the second to last stop, and I'm quoting, on the street sweeper tour at Bill Peduto, at Vote Fitz meetup in Greenfield. Again, county taxpayers paid the total cost of this travel. And one final example, I mentioned before that there has been travel outside of Allegheny County. This is some of the travel, Media Bloomfield for the gubernatorial race. Another example that you will see on your blue sheet is an example where it was listed as speaking Greensburg, and he was there to speak as a surrogate for gubernatorial or then gubernatorial candidate Tom Wolf. Now I'm going to move to the other category of concern. All of those that I just detailed for you were the misinformation submitted and the falsification of records submitted to the county claiming that use that was submitted was in fact a business purpose. Now I'm moving over to the second category of concern with Mr. Fitzgerald's misuse of the vehicle. When we cross-referenced the records that I noted earlier, which include a current odometer reading of the vehicle, which was just performed this week, as well as the fuel card usage. The county, as I said, provides the total cost of fuel for these vehicles. The numbers don't add up. And so in addition to the concern that we have with those that are not all county business purposes, we found through the second quarter of 2014 almost 20,000 missing miles.
Oh, that car.
That is not, that's a stock photo. It is the same vehicle. His car is a 2007 Jeep Grand Cherokee. The difference in that car's tan, his car's a dark gray.
You mean the county owned Jeep Cherokee vehicle or his own car?
No, this is all the county owned vehicle.
Okay.
And so before I move to questions, let me just add one final comment, just generally speaking with respect to my duties as controller and how I have conducted myself in this office. As many of you know in this room and have covered different audits that we have done, we have performed dozens upon dozens of audits while I have been in this office. And at times we have had the cooperation of the county and at times we have not. Just to give you two examples, when we performed our audit of the county's reassessment process, we issued recommendations, found problems in that process, and the county did not adhere to those recommendations. But by contrast, another recent audit, when we found overpayment to the constables in Allegheny County, the county did comply with that audit. So that is an example that I provide where we have sought that repayment and are in receipt of most of that repayment and still in the process of receiving others. So I put this in context, as I've referenced before, my duties are defined by state law, and that is at a minimum the rules that I must adhere to as the controller. So I will close my comments now and open it up to any questions.
What recourse do you have in seeking reimbursement? How can you do that? How can you get the money?
Well, my hope, and one of the reasons that I gave the example of where the county has cooperated and where they have not, The first thing that I have to do is outlined in the letter that was sent to Fitzgerald today, that I need to determine the specific amount, and I certainly can't rely upon inaccurate data or a guesstimate of what that number may be. But as I mentioned in my remarks, when I add up the 100 examples where we have identified that there was personal political purpose, plus these missing miles, just by the federal mileage rate, you see a total of over 13,000. So that is why I have requested, and it is my hope and really my expectation that Fitzgerald will provide accurate documents to that office. One avenue of recourse that I do have, again pursuant to state law, is my office is able to subpoena information. So we have requested that that information be provided to us within 1 week, specifically by a week from today, next Thursday, close of business for the county at 4:30 p.m. If I don't receive it by that time, then I, along with my attorneys, will be considering what our next steps may be.
Chelsea, the missing miles you have in that graphic there, is that reflective of vehicles throughout the county or specific vehicles?
This is only Fitzgerald's.
This is only
Fitzgerald's. This is only Fitzgerald's vehicle, and we are reviewing, there are 151 take-home vehicles throughout the county. The vast majority of those, 120 of those, are for county police and county sheriffs. So much of our audit, because those are exempt vehicles, so they have different reporting requirements. And that is detailed in the letter that was sent to law enforcement. There's very clear detail on how there's a different process for different categories of employees in Allegheny County in terms of the documentation that they submit. So that 20,000 miles is only for Mr. Fitzgerald's vehicle, and only through the end of June of this year, Q2 for 2014.
And so far you have not received an explanation from Fitzgerald about your inquiries?
We have not.
Do you expect to hear anything from them?
I hope I do, but I really cannot guess as to when or how he will respond.
Now, do you have a take-home car, and how do you handle that?
No, I've never, in this position as county controller, I've never had a take-home car. In my prior position as state representative.
Do any people in your office have a take-home car?
There are 2 individuals in my office who have take-home vehicles. One is the head of our construction inspection department, so the person responsible for overseeing all of the construction in a semi-audit function for our office. The other individual is the head of our accounting division, who frankly had that car since my predecessor was in office, and basically handed that car over to our head of accounting.
And are you confident that they're not using their vehicles for personal mileage?
From all of the information I've reviewed thus far, I'm proud to say that they are, I believe, some of the most precise in terms of the record keeping with the county. And I can also add that going back, the county, and this is more detail than you all probably want today, but since 2012, the IRS has been auditing a number of different issues within Allegheny County. And the county is likely, almost positively, because they just lost on appeal, going to be responsible for paying almost $200,000 for prior under-reporting of vehicles. And that isn't looking at this specific use like we have here, but it's basically looking at the universe. So back in 2009, 2010, through 2012, the county was only, outside of the police, saying we have roughly 13 vehicles that are used for take-home, because the county's responsibility is to report that as an auto benefit for IRS purposes. So those employees, even though the county bears the whole cost, they are taxed for that being an additional benefit on top of their salary.
How do you respond to this? This seems eerily similar to the Ravenstall probe, where he used his bodyguards on off hours, and he said because he was the mayor, he needed his bodyguards and he needed his vehicle to go places. Would Fitzgerald not fall under that same realm in terms of, needing the bodyguards, needing the city vehicle to go, places for protection?
Well,
And of course, Ravensfield's stuff went down to the feds and nothing came of it. I mean,
sure. So I can't really opine. I referred this to law enforcement so they can make their professional judgment as to what is best. I have spoken to the district attorney, so I can give you information on that. But with respect to the information that I provided here, this is all purely factual information. It's information that has been submitted to the county that is incorrect, and missing miles that have not been provided to the county. And I can't speak to the city's policy, but I do know that in the county, every employee of the county, including the county executive, is defined as a covered person, meaning that the administrative code and the rules set forth in there, including the ethics code, pertains to them. So the county executive nor any county employee in this county, by county law, is not allowed to use any county resource, and they explicitly include motor vehicles for personal purpose. So I believe that's very clear for the county. I can't speak to what the situation was in the city.
But isn't it impractical for the county executive, if he is on his way to a county event or coming from or has one scheduled later, to go home, to pick up his personal vehicle, to drive to a political event that he's scheduled to go, and then go back and get a county car?
Well, I know that, as I said, I never had a car when I was a state representative, but there were allowances for those sort of considerations. And what my understanding of my former colleagues and state representatives do is that they, in fact, reimburse the state for that non-governmental use. So what we see here is that not only was it contrary to county law, but there has never been any repayment whatsoever of these county funds.
so you're saying he should have split it up and said, this was my county use, this was my personal use, and I'm reimbursing the county for that?
I would say at a minimum, because it is very, very clear in our process that the documentation should be accurate.
How much is that 20,000 miles? What's the dollar amount on that?
So the dollar value of that would be roughly 11,200, and the calculation that we used for that and the other 100 events is the current 2014 federal mileage reimbursement rate. That's by IRS standards, is their cents per mile rule, which is 56 cents per mile. And my understanding is that is generally how, by comparison, state representatives would reimburse the state for when they're using their vehicles for non-business travel.
And that 11,000 encompasses the examples that you showed prior to that chart, correct?
So the 11,000 would be just taking this nearly 20,000 mile figure multiplied by the 56 cents per mile. So that's the 11,000, but then separately there is for the 100 events identified by the Fitzgerald's own records, that is over 2,000. So combined, they are over 13,000.
You said you talked to Steven Zappala about this?
Sure. So one of the things that I wanted to ensure this week is that all 4 of the entities to whom we sent the letter received that, and I did have a chance to have a conversation with the district attorney, and he indicated that he had spoken to the Ethics Commission, and he believed it to be initially, and I am paraphrasing, initially it to be their jurisdiction so that they should determine how they would categorize this under the Pennsylvania Ethics Code, and then either forward it on to him or the appropriate agency or not.
If he's going to Atlanta to the Democratic Convention, is he not representing the county on the national stage, and wouldn't that be part of his job?
Well, again, according to the county administrative code, that would be personal use. And I can tell you just by comparison, I was in fact at the convention, and I know many of my former colleagues who were there. They use personal cars, or they use campaign funds. I think that what we see here in that example and many, many other examples, so in totality, it is clear to me that While there may be some events where somebody could claim that this was a representation of the county, I don't believe that's true for purely partisan events, because I don't think there are going to be Republican events that he's also attending. There's a difference here, and it's a difference that I know that any person in political office has to understand.
So is there any history at all of Mr. Fitzgerald reporting or reimbursing any transportation use at all? Does this report suggest that there isn't?
There's absolutely no reimbursement from him to Allegheny County for any vehicle use or for any other potential purpose.
For his tenure as chief executive and on county council, or just for chief executive?
So certainly for chief executive, I don't believe there was any for county council. What I can tell you is the records that I reviewed, our financial management system, which some of you have heard me speak about in the past, that was implemented in 2002. So the records that are very easily attainable to me go back to 2002. So the data that I reviewed going back to 2002, I don't remember off the top of my head which year he came on to county council, but I can tell you during that time frame there have been no reimbursements that have been credited to him through the county. And in my office, we run the payroll system. So that would have also been reflected in payroll, and there was nothing there.
So Chelsea, these missing miles, or so the miles that are accounted for, did Fitzgerald have to fill out or a form to record his activity? And then for the missing miles, are you saying that there's no recorded documentation?
That is
so that constitutes a missing mile?
Correct.
Is that deceptive use of a vehicle, in your opinion?
I don't have the data. The letter that we sent to him today with respect to the missing miles, we are requesting that he very specifically provide us with the origination, the destination, so that my office can in fact calculate the actual miles. But as he is required to do under the current form, which you will see in this packet, is to categorize that as business or personal. Not to get into the weeds, but with the IRS requirements and also the county policy, as I said, there's no personal use that's allowed. But these vehicles that are take-home vehicles are provided and paid for the employee to commute to and from home. The only carve-out is for de minimis, which is defined as you're on your route home, you want to stop at the grocery store and continue home. So that's really the only thing when you reference the governing policies together.
So there are 19,000 miles worth of vehicle usage that's not documented?
Correct.
Okay. Will reimbursement end this, or are you looking for further action taken either by the Ethics Commission or law enforcement?
So as I said, my responsibilities as controller are very specifically defined in terms of these sorts of things by the state code for the second-class counties, which Allegheny County is one. So my responsibility is two-part. I trust that the authorities from the Ethics Commission to the district attorney and so forth are the authorities that best know how to answer the first part of that question in terms of what action should be taken, if action should be taken on the side of law enforcement. My responsibility, however, by the code is to seek repayment where there has been misuse of county funds. And as I referenced, that's something that we have done very recently in our audit of constables. So we will be pursuing all avenues available to us in order to seek repayment, but first to ascertain the total amount. And I should also note that by the letter sent to Fitzgerald today, we advised him to cease using that vehicle for personal political purposes.
Can you talk about what prompted this investigation?
Sure. So it was at the end of August, we decided that we were going to do an audit of county vehicle use. And quite frankly, we take into account many different factors in deciding what we were going to audit. I thought it was an appropriate topic since very recently the city had been looking similarly at their use of vehicles, including take-home vehicles. And one of the things that I do before engaging in an audit is I collect the background information. And when we collected the background information, we saw a process that was far from perfect. So this appeared to be an area that was ripe for an audit.
How did you get a look at the odometer? Did they grant you that?
They did. And the people in my office who performed that task for Mr. Fitzgerald's vehicle as well as the other vehicles are the people in my office who would normally do that sort of thing because they're in charge of asset management. So it's the same people who would go throughout the county and ensure that a server is still there and is documented as it should be. So they don't normally, outside of this audit check the odometer readings, but it was fairly standard operating procedure for those individuals in our office. And I know they didn't have any problem in obtaining the odometer reading from Fitzgerald's vehicle.
This was just an arbitrary audit? There was nothing that actually triggered your audit in August, such as the IRS?
The IRS is another factor because of many of those discrepancies that we did see through the IRS audit.
Going back to 2007, I believe?
That, off the top of my head, I believe they look back to 2009. But the fact that our county is liable to pay nearly or more than $200,000 right now to the IRS because that was a process that was not done correctly, that is certainly something that in part prompted this audit.
Anticipating a response from the executive, I'm sure he would say this is politically motivated by you, and that he, knowing him, that he can attend as many as a half a dozen events a night, and that there would be some sort of blurring. How would you respond if and when he says this is political?
Well, I think the facts speak for themselves. He is required as any county employee to submit accurate documentation and to follow the laws of the county. So under my responsibility as county controller, it's my duty to be the fiscal watchdog. Look, I understand that Mr. Fitzgerald does not like being audited, and frankly, I know that most people, I don't think anyone likes being audited, but this is part of the responsibility of the Office of the Controller, and likewise, it's his responsibility to abide by the laws set forth by the county.
You said that it could be $13,000 or more that's been accounted for. The nearly 20,000 miles equates to $11,000?
Right.
Can you explain what the other...
Sure. So, like any audit process, this is a sample size, and that's why it's so important that we ascertain and get more information so we can determine the specific amount. So the two different categories here, if you think of all of the prior slides, such as this one. So here you have 100 different events that we identified by cross-reference to social media, and these are in the blue charts within your packet, the blue spreadsheets. So you see here, if you add up this mileage, it equates to 3,882 miles for those 100 events. Those are just the events that we can see through public data and social media, like I said, his own Twitter account. So that's one category where we know that the purpose was not in fact county business, and through those events you see 3,800 some miles. In addition to that, you see 19,000 some miles that are not reported at all on these mileage logs. And so together, at roughly 2,000 some and 11,000 some, you have more than 13,000 in potential or more. It's difficult without accurate data for all of this, specifically the missing miles, and also looking at accurate recording of destination, origination, and purpose for me to specifically say.
So you have 13 unaccounted for there, and you're adding.
So if you look at this,
how do you get 20,000?
So two separate issues. If you take these, this was the first issue that I outlined in which the records are not factual. You have this full information in your packets, but the next column says business purpose or personal purpose. So up through the second quarter of 2012, Fitzgerald listed 0 miles for personal purpose, period, for that entire 2.5-year period. So everything that he listed was listed as a business purpose. When you take all of the examples, and these are just highlighting a few so you understand our methodology, but all of the 100 examples are listed here. When you add up the mileage for those 100 examples, you get to a total of 3,882 miles. So that's the first issue. The second issue is the fact that by cross-referencing fuel card usage as well as the odometer reading and other records, we find missing 19,000 some miles. So when you add those two together, you're looking at 23,000 some miles multiplied by the federal mileage rate.
Other top county officials, District Attorney Tala, Treasurer Weinstein, Sheriff, Chief of County Police, also take home vehicles. Are you going to be looking at their record keeping in this sort of scrutiny?
Sure, we have looked at their record keeping, and there are no discrepancies that we see in their record keeping.
And Executive Fitzgerald's staff's office said that they tweet for him. He's not actually managing those accounts. Does that still make Twitter a valid way to pinpoint him at locations if it's not actually him behind the keyboard?
Well, I mean, I think that begs another question, but I think that's separate from what we would be looking at in terms of our vehicle audit.